Welcome to the webinar. My name is Alyssa Tucker. I head up the Human Capital Management area at APQC, and over the next hour, we'll be talking about how organizations can foster environments that are conducive to learning, environments where employees come together to share knowledge, problem solve, and innovate. Building this kind of culture is something that takes intentional and deliberate effort. And today we have the opportunity to hear about the Coca-Cola Company's efforts towards fostering a learning culture. Our guest speaker is Tapaswee Chandele, Global Vice President of Talent and Development for the Coca-Cola Company. In this role, she's responsible for the global strategy to deliver impactful talent acquisition, talent management, learning, leadership development, organization capability development, and organization effectiveness solutions to enable Coca-Cola's growth strategy. So it is my pleasure to welcome Tapaswee Chandele to the webinar.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you so much for having me here today. As the webinar was getting started, I was seeing welcome notes from people. So I saw UK, I saw Canada, I saw Mexico, and of course the US. I may not have captured everyone, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I see Thailand as well. To all of my friends and colleagues from wherever it is that you're joining the webcast today, the magic of this new virtual world, however challenging it may be, is that we are able to get together without many restrictions and challenges and have conversations. Elisa has very kindly introduced me. I lead talent and development for the Coca-Cola Company. I'm based in Atlanta. And I have been with the company for nearly 20 years, in fact, over 20 years, and I have worked in multiple geographies, such as India, Turkey, Africa, and now I'm here in the US. I have the immense good fortune to join all of you today to share our journey over the last several years to become a learning organization. But before I begin, I wanted to send a huge thanks to the amazing team at APQC who has invited us. And I'm genuinely humbled to be able to share and present some of the work of my wonderful colleagues over the last several years at Coca-Cola. What I also wanted to share with all of you who have joined us today is I would love for the next hour to be conversational. I'm monitoring the chat, and I do want you all to send your questions, comments, feedback, and reactions. I'm going to be feeding off your energy, so please keep that coming. And I saw someone join in from South Africa, which was my stomping ground just a few years ago. So with that, let's get started. As you can see from this slide, the Coca-Cola Company has been a little bit of an introduction about the company itself. We have been around for about 135 years. We are headquartered in Atlanta in Georgia, but our products are sold in over 200 countries. We have over 200 brands, and we employ more than 700,000 employees across the entire Coca-Cola system. We are responsible, as the company side, we're responsible for manufacturing what we call the concentrate product or the syrup that we manufacture, and we sell that to our bottling partners across the world. So the company side is responsible for innovation, for marketing, for creation of new products. Our bottling partners across the world are the ones that manufacture it and bring it to all of our consumers at the point of sale, where you can enjoy a chilled Coca-Cola beverage, which is the reason why we are able to employ so many people across the world, and we are in so many countries, beautifully integrated with the local geographies. What you can see on the right-hand side is some of our brands. Hopefully you have experienced some of them, if not all of them, and thank you to each one of you as you are consuming our products and beverages. The story that I'm going to tell you today is not about that we have arrived. It's not that I'm going to tell you that we have, kind of hit the ball out of the park. This story is actually about our journey. And so it's about learning. And it's about, what we have experienced as we've tried to refresh ourselves in the last several years. All of our work and our narratives actually start with the Coca-Cola Company's purpose that you can see here. Our purpose is to refresh the world and make a difference. And we do it through loved brands done sustainably for a better shared future. And so I won't read this entire slide out to you, but what you will see here is a huge focus on employees' well-being, employees' health, employees' and in investing in our talent, and you will see that across this chart. So where did this journey actually start? Maybe it was about 6 years ago that we actually decided to reset the company strategy. And reset ourselves as being a growth organization. And so the importance of growth mindset became really important to us. And that is when we prioritized ourselves to be a learning organization. Now, some of you might ask, what is a learning organization? Is this about learning and development? That's the question that I get asked most of the time. Did you start investing in a lot of learning programs? Did you do a lot of leadership development? And yes, we did, but that's not what this is all about. What we wanted to do as part of resetting ourselves as a growth company was to be a company that has the ability to learn and unlearn very, very frequently. We needed to be able to have the capacity to continuously reinvent ourselves. And so some of the examples that I'm going to share with you is going to talk about experimentation, coming out, taking risks, doing a lot of small things over a period of time, and not being worried about perfectionism, but being concerned about progress. And if things don't go right, you're always able to reset and able to change and evolve yourself, and being able to admit that, all right, this did not go too well, maybe we need to do it differently, but making sure that we're putting the right artifacts into place. The whole importance is about the process of value creation and transformation of the company, so that we can keep evolving ourselves slowly, but not that over 15, 20 years, but slowly over a period of time, every single day, and that we are learning from each of the things that we are doing. So that's how we define ourselves to be a learning organization, an organization that is humble, that focuses on progress, that focuses on experimentation, that doesn't think failures are something horrible that cannot be done, that we celebrate some of the mistakes that we make, we learn from them, and then we make sure that everybody else knows what the learnings are, so that you don't have to repeat the same mistake 20 times to be able to learn from it, but make sure that we are normalizing the process of learning. So I'm going to tell you a few examples, and this would be the first one. I'll start with the growth behaviors, and you may have actually seen that in our slide that was on purpose. So in 2016, when we started to reset the company strategy, we wanted to actually start with our growth behaviors, and these growth behaviors did not exist before that. But we stepped back and we said, everything that we do as a company has to be done through our people. It's not as if the company is an independent body from its people. And so people have to understand, what does it mean to be a learning organization? What does it mean to have a growth mindset? And we wanted to rally everybody on a different cultural path. And this is when we created these growth behaviors. The growth behaviors then in themselves are on the slide. So I'm not going to read them out to you and tell you what they are. They are simple, they're very easy to understand. The story that I want to tell you actually is the process of creating these growth behaviors, which is very different from how we used to do things in the past. What we did when we created these growth behaviors is that we reached out to our global system and we actually asked for employees that were interested in helping co-create the growth behaviors of the Coca-Cola Company for the future. And I used to be in South Africa at that point of time. And we all nominated or invited somebody from our business units to go and participate in this amazing workshop that was going to happen in Atlanta. A whole group of employees that either put up their hands and said, I wanted to participate, or their business unit said, this is the person that we want to send talent from all across the world. They were not the senior most leaders of the company. So it's not as if the operating unit head went to Atlanta to do this piece of work, but a group of employees came together in Atlanta. And over a period of a week, or I think 2 weeks, I think it was about 10 days, actually co-created the company's growth behaviors together through a process of experimentation, iteration, reaching out. They did global surveys, they reached out to people, they did focus interviews, and they used design thinking as a process to be able to come out with the sharp 4 growth behaviors that would resonate with all of our employees globally. That would be something that people can identify, that does not require an almanac to be able to decipher or understand what they are, but inspire and engage our employees. And within a period of, I think, 10 or 12 days, this work was completed. We are, of course, a marketing company, so we can create nice logos around most things. So we were able to do that quite nicely ourselves. And we were able to communicate these growth behaviors out to the company. And that was a really good reset moment, because we were telling everybody for the first time, push for progress, don't push for perfection. Keep being curious. Being curious is the first step of being a learning organization, because if you're curious, you're going to ask questions. When you ask questions, you're going to get answers, and it generates a dialogue that happens. We wanted to make sure that people feel empowered to do the work that they have to do and be comfortable that everything is not going to be right. And then, of course, inclusivity. or the ability to be amazing together is part of our DNA, always has been, and we wanted to reinforce that. And this was a really, really important step. And so I wanted to share this with all of you, that if some of you are on this journey yourselves today, start with what inspires people. Start with setting the right tone in the organization that helps kind of break down some of the barriers that sometimes people have to create a learning organization. When we created these behaviors, they were not meant for a poster. So you will see another example that I will share with you later, which is going to be around our leadership model. And we have always followed the process of not putting it on a poster, not printing mugs, and not creating a big campaign around it, but embedding all of these things into our practices so that people can then start to see them come to life, and it can become part of people's language and lexicon. So for example, our growth behaviors found themselves into our performance enablement practice that I will talk about next. They were in our recruiting guides so that we were recruiting people against these behaviors. They were in all of our material that we used in town halls that we communicated against, so that people started to see that each of our people practices were actually leaning back on these growth behaviors, and we were tracking people. We were reminding people, we were tracking people against that. So what happens next? Once we created the growth behaviors, the next thing that we wanted to do was reset our performance practice. We used to have a fairly traditional performance practice, which now is not so, and we refreshed ourselves in that as well in 2016. And I think a lot of companies and a lot of you who are on this call today would have a similar journey like ours. So I'm sure I'm not sharing something with you that you have not heard or seen before. But what we also wanted to do in journey of becoming a learning organization is to go away from the hierarchy and the bureaucracy of ratings and complicated cascading of goals and mid-year reviews and year-end reviews, because we recognize that the business is too dynamic for us to be able to set what needs to be done for the full year in advance and never look at it again and do it differently. What we also wanted people to stop focusing on labels and ratings and actually focus on day-to-day near-term work, which is the work which we call work that matters most, and ensure that we are having more meaningful, frequent feedback. And so several years ago, we eliminated performance ratings. We brought in a practice called performance enablement that is all about focusing on near-term work or work that matters most. We encourage our employees and managers to have frequent conversations, at least monthly, if not more. And we have enabled this with technology to give people a forum to be able to record their reflections, to be able to write their notes and so on and so forth. And we also introduced upward feedback, which is every single month, every single manager gets upward feedback from their teams about how they are experiencing the opportunity to work with this leader and in this team, and give them feedback for their development, which only the manager sees. And this was a really big reset that we had from a performance standpoint, because it resulted in us being able to iterate very frequently. It helped us course correct very frequently, and we didn't have to wait for 6 months before we gave anybody feedback about, well, this is not exactly going the way we wanted to. And the performance enablement practice has actually helped us tremendously in terms of building a culture where frequent learning is celebrated. A lot of experimentation is encouraged, and a lot of good co-creation happens. We have also seen over a period of time feedback reducing from employees in terms of being surprised about what their final annual incentive was, or how did they get what they got, because we are having more frequent conversations during the year. And we have made sure that the employee's voice has become a really big voice in the entire process. With that, we have continued to make improvements. So what you saw is the practice that we had created 4 or 5 years ago, which has landed really well. And then this year, we actually evolved the practice to introduce multi-rater feedback into our performance enablement practice. I think some of you may already know we went through a significant transformation last year, and our transformation has been to become a networked organization. And what that means is that we will operate, without silos, without hierarchies, and we will operate around the work that matters the most and connect the global organization around our biggest and highest priorities, which meant that you were not going to be operating in traditional hierarchies. So if I reported it into Susan and Molly reported into me, it doesn't mean that Molly, Tapaswee, and Susan are the only ones that are working. We have a lot of people in the network. We are working with our customers, with our bottlers, etc. And we wanted to make sure that we are able to bring the total network together. And so we introduced multi-rater feedback. And in this multi-rater feedback, what we have done is now every single employee has the ability to request for feedback from a broader population, not just only from their managers. And so they are able to get feedback from their functional managers, from their peers, from their project managers, from their project team members. And so we are expecting a lot more people will be working in projects globally. And therefore, we will be able to get multiple feedback points from across different stakeholder groups. As far as I know, we are one of the fewer companies that have been able to implement multi-rater feedback into our performance practices. This is the first year that we have done that. And we are enabling this through a huge culture of coaching and development, leadership capability and accountability, and making sure that we are leaning very heavily on learning through the entire process. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I saw a message come in about bad connection. So I just want to make sure, Elisa, if you can confirm to me that you are able to hear me and it's not my connection that is a problem.
Yes, Tapaswee, we can hear you well, and I believe we'll get a call, try to get a call-in number for the individual who's having trouble hearing.
Yes, I will respond to her individually. Thank you so much.
Okay, wonderful. No, I just wanted to make sure that I have heard the feedback. Thank you. And thank you. I saw the other notes also come in. Great. Wonderful. So I think I did see some questions on performance enablement. So you said that the slide says that the feedback from multi-rater feedback received will count. What does making it count mean? Yes. So great question. And so what we have is, at the end of the year, so basically the process, the way it runs, and I may be, getting into too much detail here. So feel free to stop me if it's too much information. But every single month, as the reflections are happening, every manager enters reflections on the system. They kind of give feedback on multiple different questions that we've asked. We've asked some very simple 6 to 7 questions. And that feedback, as you can see from column 3 here, leadership accountability, forms part of the scatter plots. In the past, only the manager's feedback used to form part of the scatter plots, which is the graph that is available at the end of the year, based on which we have calibration discussions about our highest and our lowest contributors. In this current year, with the performance enablement refresh, where we have introduced multi-rater feedback, now feedback from everybody forms part of the scatter plot, because we wanted to amplify the importance of leadership effectiveness along with work contribution. So you will see that on the bottom right-hand side of the slide. So now feedback from your functional leader, feedback from your direct reports, feedback from your project leader, feedback from your project reports, all forms part of the scatter plot, which will ultimately be able to give us data at the end of the year on where a person's performance lies on work contributions and leadership effectiveness, but from multiple data points. So it's not only from one person alone, not only from their manager. The only persona group that we have not included in the dashboards is actually the peers, because we expect that peer feedback is only for development. It's given to you in the case of the impact that you're creating. And we also did not want to create, for the lack of a better word, a friends and family kind of a network where you ask all of your peers to give you feedback, and that forms part of your scatter plot, and peers may not have had an opportunity to actually see the day-to-day work or give critical feedback. So we've kept that out of the dashboards, but we have included the rest into the dashboards. That allows for people to understand that both the whats and the hows matter, and that you have to make sure that you're making effective performance across the network versus just handling, managing your manager in some ways. All right, so great question, and thank you for that. So this was an improvement that we made in the practice, and I wanted to show you, how we have introduced something really good and then started to make it better. Moving on to the next example, and I saw a question from you, Alan, on performance enablement, and I'll take that up in the Q&A section. And do keep the questions coming. Thank you for that. The next thing that we did was early 2020, and so this is work from just last year, when we realized that as we are starting to establish ourselves as a networked organization, as we are starting to build leadership for the future, whilst we know that people understand the growth behaviors and that motivates and inspires everybody, we also wanted to make sure that we are very clear about what does leadership at Coca-Cola mean. And so as you can see from this, we connected this to our purpose. But just like I told you the story of how we created the growth behaviors, we did the exact same process in terms of creating our leadership definition. And what we did was a co-creation approach. So we have never actually brought in external consulting partners or someone like that to be able to write our narratives, like our purpose or our growth behaviors, or our leadership definition. And this was also co-created internally from a cross section of employees, not only from HR, but from the business. And we came together and we wrote this leadership model. And the most important thing here is the three expectations that are outlined, which is be the role model, set the agenda, help people be their best selves. And we put this leadership model into place together. So you will see the growth behaviors are integrated here. You will see it on the left-hand side, because there was some confusion in the company. Well, am I supposed to listen to the growth behaviors? Is the leadership model important? And so we integrated that together and we said growth behaviors are part of what you do personally to be a role model. And we integrated that into our leadership definition. And the reason we wanted to establish the leadership definition was we wanted to set a very aspirational North Star for all of our leaders, so that there is a clear understanding of what it means to be a leader in Coca-Cola and what we are holding our leaders accountable for. And so we did that, and this was really useful. We did this in early 2020. Obviously none of us had any foresight about what was going to happen to all of us as a human race or a planet in 2020. So this was just literally before the pandemic hit us. And I cannot tell you how useful this leadership model has been for us in the last 18 months. It has helped set the North Star for us. We have been able to inspire and engage our leaders with this as the North Star. And it has helped us with communication and helping leaders understand what they are responsible for as they have been navigating the last several years. So as you will see from some of my stories, we are putting into place very strong artifacts that build upon each other over a period of time, and not thinking that this is a one-year journey and everything that we have to do will get completed in the first year itself. Stevie, great question. So how do you hold leaders accountable to these principles? And so there is no one way that we are holding leaders accountable to these principles. It's a journey, and what we have done is some of the things that would be very intuitive that all of you would know already and would be doing, which is make sure that whatever you create, you embed this into your tools. So for example, we embedded the leadership definition back into the same thing. We repeated what we had done before and which had worked for us. We refreshed all of our interview guides. We refreshed performance enablement, and we included questions that linked directly to our leadership definition in it. We made sure that in every single communication town hall, so if our CEO or my boss, Lisa Chang, who's our Chief People Officer, comes out and talks to the organization, she refers to the leadership definition and the model. When we were redesigning ourselves last year, we used the leadership definition as a North Star to be able to select the right leaders and appoint them into roles. We wanted to feel very confident that the people we were placing into roles, aspirational roles in the company, are able to live the leadership definition. So it's not one thing or the other. It's just about making sure that we are all signed up to what we all believe is the right thing to do. And then we are reminding everybody over and over and over again. Later on in this presentation, I'll share with you one of the tools that we have for recognition. It's called Celebrating You, which has been super useful to us. So one of the things that we've also done in Celebrating You is embed our leadership definition into Celebrating You, which is it's a really nice tool where people can recognize anybody within the company. And that is where you can actually pick the behavior or the expectation that you are recognizing someone for. So if I was to send a Celebrating You points or a recognition to, let's say, Elisa, I would say I'm doing this because she has helped set the agenda, and here are some of the things that she did. So our aim has always been around being able to put this into our infrastructure so that people can get reminded about it over and over and over again. It also helps us iterate a little bit. So what happens with that is when we start seeing people use some aspects of this and not use other aspects of this, we also understand what's resonating with people much better. and what's not resonating with people, so then we can continue to iterate. So one of the pieces of work that we are going to do in 2022 is we are going to go back and look at our leadership definition and see whether there is an opportunity to refine some of the behaviors that are under the expectations, because we've realized some of them are resonating really well, some of them are not. And we also want to amplify certain other aspects like network leadership, like inclusion, and so on and so forth. So we will be doing some of that work. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you for asking. Welcome, Stevie. And so the next step that we did was, and this is very, very new work. So I will not have a lot of proof points to share with you right now. So there'll be a lot more strategy thinking versus, here is what we have done. And hopefully if I come and talk to you in the next several years, I might be able to tell you what progress we've made from a learning strategy standpoint. So now we get into pure learning and leadership learning and capabilities development. So I think all of us struggle with this in many companies. What is leadership? What is transversals? What is functional? The finance team wants to work on system economics, but there is also digital, and it doesn't matter whether you're a finance person or you're a marketing person or you're an HR person. Everybody needs to know data and digital and change management. So they seem transversal in nature, and yet there is leadership. And so and so what we did was we had to spend some time organizing this entire thing in our own heads as well. And so what you will see here is we designed this very simple metaphor of the wheel, which is leadership and culture is the hub of the wheel. It's the center. Without the hub, nothing else will work. If you don't have that, you need to have a consistent set of values and behaviors: trust, safety, inclusion, empowerment. It provides synchronicity, it provides drive, it provides focus. And so we made sure that leadership and culture becomes the hub of our overall integrated learning model. We then go into what are the spokes of the wheel, which is transversal enterprise capabilities, which doesn't matter where you are in the company, which function you are in, what level you are in, what you're supposed to do. We expect everyone to be able to have a good level of understanding of that. And we want to build capabilities across the enterprise in a consistent manner. And so things like digital and data, things like change management, things like agile. And so these are the ones that we have actually prioritized, and we have created enterprise-wide squads that are working together on this. So it's not as if my team alone is actually focused on driving this. We have got people from marketing, from franchise, from finance, everyone coming together and saying, let's tackle agile together. And let's just make sure that everyone is receiving a consistent learning experience across the company. And then finally, which is the tire, which is the functional and the technical capabilities. We totally recognize storytelling, really important for marketing. Let marketing develop that. And of course, we can pick that up. And if somebody in another function like technical or supply chain wants to learn more about storytelling, they can pick the curriculum from marketing and be able to implement it there, so that we are not creating the same thing over and over 15 times in different functions across the enterprise. So we really has helped establish that, and that has helped us tremendously with rallying the entire organization together in terms of what matters. And it has also helped us tremendously in terms of building focus in the organization, because as some of you might know who have been involved in the learning journey, it's very hard to get prioritized, because everything is important. These are 10 things, and then we don't make progress on any one. So this model, this ability to create enterprise squads, the ability to engage the business, bring people together, has been really, really helpful to us. And what you can see on the right-hand side of the slide is how we are kind of changing everything from a learning and a leadership and a capability standpoint. So less worried about content, more worried about context, which means that we bring people together in a virtual world through social learning to be able to have conversations around things that matter the most and help learn from each other. We are not at all assuming that people who are creating the learning curriculum are the ones that have all of the answers. Trying to make sure that the solutions are integrated, and technology is a really big part of that. Talking about experiences, building communities, making sure that there are resources that are available. So we have invested very heavily in a lot of good digital learning solutions that we have brought in from the outside. And I'm sure all of you are also doing the same, and building a lot of informal learning experiences for our employees globally, and focusing less on cohort-based, curriculum-based, classroom-based learning, which of course, given the pandemic conditions, if we didn't do that, there wouldn't be any other solution. So somehow, the conditions also helped us make the strategy come to life. So I'll show you. So I've already talked a lot about learning, leadership development, and capabilities. So I'll just show you, some slides. I won't talk about all of them. What does it mean to have a definition of capabilities? What is our promise to our employees? So we've made a really clear promise about making our employees more competitive, more employable, making sure that they're getting the skills that they need for the future, and also the commitment to the business. So here is an example, and I already actually talked to you about that in the prior one, of how we have made that wheel come to life. So if you look at this is our integrated capability model, and you would have, you could create this for every single function as you go on the outside of the wheel to put in certain skills there. But people and culture, which remains core to the work that we do, and within leadership development, we are focusing very heavily on leadership development related to people's transition points versus your level in the hierarchy, and how senior you are in the organization. That really doesn't matter. We really focus on where you need most help. Establishing a very strong coaching practice, which we have done over the last 18 months. A lot of external partnerships that we have also brought in as account of that. A lot of solutions that we have put into place for team development, because as we are moving into a networked organization, the ability to be able to bring people together and help the teams become effective at the first instance has become really important. So we've got some really good tools like that we have built internally to help teams establish themselves successfully early with that. And of course, we are launching mentoring across the company. So this is the 4 strong pillars that we are establishing around our people and culture agenda for leadership development. I've already talked to you about agile, digital, and data and change management. These are our 3 enterprise-wide transversals, and we are going to be building a lot of skills and capabilities across the enterprise on these 3. And of course, it's not that these are the only 3. When we feel like we've made enough progress in one of them, we will then move on to the next one. So we might bring in design, we might bring in something else, but we wanted to focus the organization on these. And then, of course, if you are in the finance function or the HR function, you would have your specific 3 functional capabilities. And we've been really deliberate about making it to the top 3 because we wanted to focus the organization, make progress, keep moving, make progress, keep moving. So it goes back to what I shared with you earlier about being a learning organization. We are not trying to tackle everything at the same time, knowing that we will be making limited progress if we try to do everything. Let's do fewer things, let's do them well. If we identify the wrong thing, we can iterate. So for example, if in this whole thing, agile is not the right one, we can change it, but let's at least get started. Let's get the organization focused so that we can make some progress. So that was our overall, story as it relates to learning, leadership development, and capabilities in the aid of, building a learning organization. The next thing that I wanted to share with all of you is that artifacts and rewards really matter. And so people don't do things for just, like we don't live on love and oxygen. It's like people don't just live for doing something for the sake of doing things. And so what we have actually done is embed a lot of artifacts to be able to help us on this journey. So I talked about celebrating you already. It's a very strong established asset within the Coca-Cola Company. It's a way that we recognize one another. It can be with or without points, but it can be just for something that you have done that created an impact on somebody else. So it's timely. It's right when the moment has happened, and it's very, very good and high usage across the company. And we have integrated that with our leadership definition and with our growth behaviors, so that the recognition from our peers, from each other, keeps reinforcing exactly what we want the company to remember and align on. What we are also doing right now under Celebrating You is what you see on the top left of this chart, which is the experimentation heroes, which is people that have done something different, who have tried something, experimented with something. Let's talk about them. Let's celebrate them. Let's recognize each other for that. And we've also done some different things. So for example, we created the innovation awards. And in fact, we had even done at 1 year, an awards for the biggest failure, like things that did not work. Let's come talk about that. Let's learn from it. So the whole intention was to make sure that we are normalizing and making failure or mistakes acceptable, because I think all of us as human beings struggle with that. All of us always want to be successful, and we wanted to be able to implement that. And then finally, the example that I wanted to give you around annual incentive is in many of our business business operating units, what some of the leaders did was they held back a certain amount of our budget, and you will see that in the article that I have published on this topic. Held back a certain amount of the budget and said, I'm going to hold back the incentive budget once all of the recommendations are completed. That little percentage that I have held back, a few percent, I'm going to actually distribute it to the people that tried something and failed. And so, they really made a big effort about doing something. They put themselves at risk. They stuck their necks out. It did not work. That's all right. But I want to be able to recognize that. And so it was a wonderful opportunity where the leaders, where people who actually took risks, did not have a huge success at the end of it to show, but they actually took risks. They tried something, found that it reflected in their annual incentive at the end of the year. And I think that's a really powerful example of what we all can do from our existing infrastructure of tools that are available to us to be able to make sure that we are helping create the culture of learning and accountability. So here is my final slide, and then I will open it out to questions. And I've seen quite a few questions come up in the chat as well, which is what have been in our learnings in summary. And so first one, which is the most important thing is to be able to set a strategic North Star. I think everyone thinks it's like quite obvious. Yeah, of course, we want to create a culture of learning. We want to create a culture of failure, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't happen till it's set as a clear strategic priority. It forms part of your purpose. It forms part of your growth behaviors. And it's actively communicated so that everybody, especially in large global companies, understands that this is important to the company. The second one is to invite employees into the discussion. Very rarely will you find that when you invite your employees to come and co-create something that is going to be enterprise-wide, that people will not be interested to participate. So inviting them into the discussion, keeping it really simple so that everyone can understand. I think all of us will appreciate how much of a cognitive overload we have these days with everything that is going on. And the more complicated things are, especially from HR, the less are the chances of people absorbing it and making it part of their lexicon. What we have understood with our growth behaviors and our leadership model is that the simple, easy to understand is becoming part of people's language, everyday language. The second big learning that we had was that leadership is the key that will unlock the door. And I know that we want to talk about everything being bottoms up. Yes, it is, but it's very important to set the tone from the top as well. And this is where our purpose document that I talked about earlier was very, very useful to us, because people are looking continuously for role modeling, for humility from their leaders. And as all of us know, humility, when you're humble, you listen. When you are listening, you're learning. And therefore, humility and the ability to be able to make mistakes was set as a tone right from the top. I've given you some good examples around artifacts and routines. And so, for example, a routine would be if you had, let's try to establish project postmortems or pre-mortems, in fact, as part of the routines that we do for all of the projects that we are doing, and not to make it a bad thing. Like, okay, we are about to do something, what could go wrong? Let's talk about that. And then after projects are completed, always doing a post-project review. So since Agile has become such a big part of how we do work, some of these retrospectives and reflections and post-project completions, documentation of learnings, what did we learn, what went wrong, what should we not repeat, etc., is starting to become part of our culture. I'm not saying it's done every single place in a consistent manner, but it's something that we are encouraging, recognizing, and it's really, really important to be able to do that part of reflection so that the learnings of that are absorbed. The fourth learning is to make sure that we're integrating the experiences from an end user standpoint. And this is where technology is a really big, important enabler. We sometimes underestimate the importance of that. And sometimes the best thought through strategy and experiences can fall flat if, it's just too hard for the employee to be, or the manager to be able to get to the tool or to be able to answer the fantastic questions that we've asked, but people find it incredibly hard to enter to be able to experience, or if the technology platforms don't connect with one another. And so it's really, really important. Here you might want to go slightly slow, but go at the speed that allows for a lot of integration. What we are also recognizing now, and I think all of you may also know that the data that comes out of these HR systems is really, really important for us to keep iterating our strategy as we move forward. And finally, and most importantly, is just get started. I mean, even we don't have to have 5 perfect ideas before we do the first one. And it's just to be willing to take the first step, knowing that there is a chance of failure. Let's just get started. If it goes wrong, you can iterate and correct it. Have a sense of humor and just be okay with it. Just keep moving. So with that, Elisa, I think at least the presentation part of this conversation is over, and then we can go to questions. And I think I took a few of them as we were
Sure.
talking.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much, Tapaswee, just for giving us and just taking the time to share with us how you're building a learning culture at the Coca-Cola Company. And we have a lot of great questions, and I would like to invite anyone who hasn't already submitted their questions to please go ahead and do so. And we're going to have a great Q&A session. So why don't we jump right in? Tapaswee, I wanted to get started with one of the questions that we had earlier in the chat, which was how do you integrate multi-rater feedback into employee performance? And they gave an example by scaling point, multiplying with the weight of each criteria.
Okay. So, and I can also see a question that comes here from Todd, which is kind of related to the question that you've asked, which is the focus on continuous and multi-rater feedback rather than year-end assessments. And without ratings, how do you differentiate between high, average, and low performance? So I'll kind of answer both of them together.
Excellent.
Because they're connected. So the process that we work on, Todd and the other person that asked the question, is like I said, we have dashboards that get created throughout the year based on the feedback that has been provided by each of the feedback provider groups. At the end of the year, we do have calibration discussions. So it's not, we haven't got rid of the performance calibration discussions where leadership teams come together and they have a conversation around 2 topics. One, what was the work that mattered most this year? What was driving strategy? And then having that discussion and then calibrating people as your highest contributors towards the work that mattered most. And then obviously the other end of the spectrum, which is the lowest contributors towards work that matters most. And we use that data to be able to calibrate. We don't assign ratings. We don't spend a disproportionate amount of time trying to calibrate the people that are in the middle, that who's the highest side of the middle or the lowest side of the middle. The focus is very heavily on what people could have done differently, what have we learned from it, what were the key strengths, etc. And then there is manager discretion in being able to, assign the annual incentive that comes with that. But of course, we have some guidance from a reward standpoint on what should be the minimum for the highest contributors, what should be the maximum for the lowest contributors, and then giving flexibility. We also have lots of, obviously, as you would understand, anything related to rewards has governance associated with it. So obviously our rewards teams have a lot of governance that we're not going completely rogue. But we have actually helped build a lot of capability in the company with that. So the focus is a lot about work that matters most and the contribution towards it. Focus is a lot about development. And then because people are having frequent conversations throughout the year and, like I said, anticipated monthly, managers are held accountable for being able to deliver the message on the incentive and performance linked to the conversations that they've been having. We don't have to be geniuses to know that where those conversations don't happen, those conversations can become really difficult at the end of the year. We have actually found, and we've been doing this now for nearly four years now, we didn't break compensation by this. In fact, the conversation started to become a lot more human and a lot more robust.
And Tapaswee, I think you maybe have already answered this, but I'm going to just ask it just to make sure that, you feel that we've covered it fully. And this question comes from Kristen, and is learning or risk taking tied to compensation at all? Is anything else that you wanted to say on that?
I mean, not explicitly, Kristen, like it's not as if this is what you got because you took a risk. Like the best example would be what I already shared, which was, annual incentive being held by slight amount being held back to be able to give to people that actually tried something and failed. But as part of our performance enablement practice, our leadership model and the questions that are asked are linked to work contribution as well as leadership effectiveness. And the part of the growth mindset in our leadership model is core to the questions on leadership effectiveness. So you are actually asking questions around people taking feedback, taking risks, taking chances, learning from it, etc. through the year. And obviously people that are able to do more of that are given a higher, I want to stay away from the word rating, are rated higher on that particular behavior through the year. And so it's not explicitly like you took a risk, here is your bonus, but it's like through the year, we are actually considering that to be a high factor in terms of a person's performance.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Angela, and she's asking, how can you push back against a culture of perfectionism? And she wanted to say she's really interested in answering this question in the context of an operational or technical team where there is no budget to accommodate mistakes, and also maybe where you have a culture where perfectionism has been rewarded over the years.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And honestly, it's not easy at all. So Angela, completely understand your question and why this would be challenging. I think it also, let's also acknowledge it depends on industry as well, right? So if you are building a plane, I don't think we can say, oh, well, I made a mistake. So I think it also depends on the kind of work in the industry. It is hard. And I think the way I would say is that there's never one easy answer, and there is not one way to get at it. So if you feel like this is the culture that you want to build in your organization, which is progress rather than perfection, it takes years and years and years of reiterating, storytelling, showcasing, celebrating. And that's the story that I've tried to tell today. So make sure that your artifacts actually support the ambition that you have. Make sure that you have, stated that vision out, lead from the front. It was very helpful for us, when our CEO came out and said that, I want to make progress. I'm fine with version 1.0 at this point, and then we get to 2.0 and 3.0. And it's absolutely fine to make progress rather than making it perfect. And it was a problem that we had as the Coca-Cola Company. We are a 135-year-old company. We are very visible. And so we also try very hard, not, we don't want to be visibly making mistakes. And it was a journey for us also to acknowledge that. Not that we are perfectly great at not being perfect today, but it's a journey for us as well. But I would just say, like, if you are in the, I guess, medical field, if you're doing like a brain surgery, obviously there is no scope for errors. And that's where Six Sigma and being absolutely perfect there matters. So I think you have to just differentiate between what are you doing, how perfect do you need to be, and then actually creating a good culture around, making some degree of, progress acceptable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Next question goes back to earlier in the presentation. It's from Christine, and she wants to be clear about the growth behavior. She wants to know, are growth behaviors different from the company's core values or core competencies?
They are. So basically, there is nothing that we don't have any concept of a company's core competencies. What we do have very clearly articulated is our leadership definition, which is what I shared with you. Be the role model, set the agenda, help people be their best selves. And the growth behaviors are integral to being the role model. So the 4 growth behaviors is what we have articulated. Other than that, the growth behaviors are fully embedded into our company's purpose. So if you go to our website, you will be able to find our purpose, and the growth behaviors are embedded in that. So we have kind of integrated all of that together, and we haven't created any more competencies, models, and behaviors, because we wanted to keep things simple for our employees and make sure that they're able to remember some of the things that we are doing.
Great, thank you. And I want to ask a question from Mander, who says, fear of not achieving goals makes people reluctant to try new methods. How can you overcome that institutionally?
Yeah, I think good question, Mander. And I don't think there is, there are 2 ways I'll answer this question. First, I'll give you a research-based answer, and then a practical business-based answer. I think one of the reasons why a lot of companies have actually started to move away from performance ratings over the last several years is for exactly this reason. And I think what people have started to find is that when you start to attach a label, a high performance label, whatever that may be, exceptional performance, let's say, people start to chase the rating versus actually taking risks, etc. And I think I remember there was some piece of research several years ago which said actually over a period of time, your highest contributors start taking less risks. And so I think what we have found is, getting rid of some of those archaic ways of measuring people's inspiration, performance, etc., goes a really long way in terms of setting the right tonality within the company. On the other hand, I think also what we also did in Coke in the last several years was we wanted to change this behavior where people actually set goals that are very much achievable, and then you get there, right? And so we started to create this culture wherein we very visibly said, let's set the goals really, really high. And it's absolutely fine if you don't get there, but at least you'll get much higher than where you were. Because I think we all are, we are in the business of, driving consumer value. Many of us are public companies, so we have to, deliver results. So we have to make sure that we keep that mindset also in mind. But how to make sure that we are setting really aspirational goals. We are not trying to create goals that are just achievable, and make sure that we normalize that. So those are the two ways I think we have tried to tackle it in Coca-Cola. But of course, this is like a very human behavior, and I think all of us, would like to be successful. So it's a cultural change that we have to drive.
Sure. Our next question is, how are learning priorities defined? Do you at Coca-Cola have a specific method or process for defining learning priorities?
I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Is it Jose? I presume Jose or Jose. Jose, we nothing different from I think all of you may be doing, and like I have shared with you our learning model. We actually do the same process of learning, understanding learning needs across the enterprise. We bring in a lot of external thinking as well. Sometimes when employees are telling you what they want to learn, maybe not the best thing that they need to learn. And so we are actually bringing in a lot of external thinking that's linked to our growth aspirations. And then we are just prioritizing. So I don't think I'll be able to tell you anything that you all are not doing. It follows pretty much the same approach. What I have felt is slightly different, at least from what I have experienced in the last 20 years in Coca-Cola. So Coke versus Coke in the last year, etc., we have heavily prioritized. And so what we have done is we have democratized a lot of learning. And so we have, I think, a lot of the solutions that all of you may also have available to people to be able to, pursue learning at their own time. And so we don't try to tell people what to learn there. We let people, carve their own adventure. And we are starting to make a lot more learning democratized, socially available, etc. We don't mandate that there. But what we are also doing, on the other hand, is making sure that we are clearly prioritizing what you saw in my integrated capability model and communicating that very actively, so that people can then decide, okay, if I have only a finite amount of time, what should I spend time on? And therefore, we are trying to direct people in a very gentle way towards things that we think we have prioritized across the enterprise.
And this is kind of related. What do you do if employees are saying, I have too much on my plate, I don't have time for learning? How do you deal with that?
We treat people like adults. And I think that it's a very real problem. And I think that in the last 18 months, we've realized, all of us are overwhelmed. We've got a lot on our plates. We are working from home. We've got families to take care of, ourselves to take care of, so many things to do. And so we are not telling people you have to do X number of hours of learning and this is what you have to do. We are creating an environment where it's easy to access good learning solutions. We are encouraging people to do that. We are celebrating when people do that. We are starting to integrate that into different things across the talent life cycle. But ultimately, we treat people like adults. We anticipate that people will focus on what they need to focus on, and we are leading with the carrot, not with the stick.
Yeah. Okay, great. And we're almost at time. So I have one last question. And this is one I'm finding in the chat, and I think it's a nice one to end on. We do have some questions, Tapaswee, that we're not going to have time to get to. So if you're okay with it, I will send you those questions afterwards via email. And maybe we can make sure that those get answered and send those answers out in a follow-up email. Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the last question comes from Fabio, and it's, what was the single biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges in your transformation, and how did you overcome it?
Single biggest challenge. It's a great question. I think the single biggest challenge would be several years ago, which is when we were trying to change the culture of the company, was to just get started, because again, we were trying to go from what we used to be a legacy hierarchy company in the past to a very different kind of company in the future, a lot of co-creation, a lot of, bringing in people, lack of perfectionism and all of that. And so I think the single biggest challenge was, how do we actually rally the entire organization around it? How do we do it in a simple manner that everyone can understand? it was just the first step. It's almost like, sending a rock down that's pushing it the first time is the hard one, and then after that it gains momentum. And what we realized was that sometimes it's just great to put things out there. Once they're out there, you can't take the genie back into the bottle. And so once it's out there, then employees rally around it, and then we learn from it. So I think that would be the only thing that comes to mind, honestly. I think some of the other things that I think are bigger challenges, which are, in my opinion, sometimes insurmountable, is if your leadership is not aligned to the strategy and the direction, if everyone does not own it, and people don't believe in the company strategy, and they don't believe in the direction that the company is headed in, they disagree fundamentally with some of the things that are happening. Those things, in my opinion, are insurmountable. And I think those are the things that need to be addressed first. So if you're going into a big transformation and journey, and if we are still struggling around whether this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, then maybe spend some more time there, so that once you have the leadership aligned around it, we can start to make progress from that standpoint, from that point onwards.
Great. Well, that's a great way to end things. I do want Tapaswee, want to just thank you so much for taking the time to share today, and just let listeners know that in the follow-up email, they will get a copy of the slides and recording. There'll be some additional resources, including an article that Tapaswee wrote on this particular topic. So be sure to check those out. And then we also, in the slide deck, have information where you can contact APQC or Tapaswee to ask any questions that maybe you haven't submitted to us yet. So thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day or evening.
Thank you for having me.